Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ventures Podcast. This is a special episode geared toward a new cohort that my partners and I at Proto Ventures, together with our portfolio company Figment, are putting together to train Web 2 product managers how to rapidly get up to speed to be Web 3 product managers. And so today, my guest, Spencer Graham, he is an extraordinary human being, extremely talented Web3 product manager that has dove deep into the DAO space, Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. And so in this episode, we dive into DAOs, all things DAOs, how to spin up a DAO, how to think about when and how and why to form a DAO, the different options that are available out there for you, and more. So if you're listening to this episode, you can also watch by visiting wclittle.com, and there you'll see more extensive show notes and links to the different things that we talk about today. And if you're watching, you can also listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can just search for Ventures. So with that, please enjoy this episode with Spencer Graham. All right, Spencer, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, good to be back.
So as we explore Web3, there are so many different aspects: DeFi, DAOs, NFTs, zero knowledge proofs, smart contracts, all the different layer 1, layer 2, rollups, side channels, et cetera, et cetera. And as part of this cohort that we're developing for experienced product managers to get up to speed on Web3, we're going to take a moment today to dive specifically into DAOs, Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. And I'm just honored to have you back on the show because as we've learned more recently, you have dove deep into the DAO space. And so I'd love to just start by, maybe for those that didn't watch the previous episode, a little bit about yourself and kind of what's been your DAO journey to date.
Happy to talk about that. My DAO journey has basically been the same as my crypto journey in a sense, in many ways. I was aware of and kind of interested in as a new technology, both Bitcoin and Ethereum for some time. Bitcoin obviously a little bit longer given it's older. And then I really fell. Rabbit hole is a cliche at this point, but it is so perfectly descriptive. I fell down the rabbit hole primarily into Ethereum, like late 2016, early 2017. Coming actually at it from a healthcare perspective, realizing just how broken all of the incentives were within at least the U.S. healthcare system, and kind of tracing back some of the root causes of that to the fact that patients don't own or control or can take their data with them, and and all of the perverse incentives that breeds for other healthcare institutions and organizations to hoard and silo off that information and not work with each other on for the patient's best interest, and especially economically and financially. And I kind of learned that in one of the jobs that I was in, and started realizing how profoundly different that system could potentially be if we were using Web3 technologies, smart contracts, self-sovereign identity, distributed data storage, all of that kind of stuff. And from there, the rabbit hole just widened up even further, and I got really into lots of things within the Ethereum ecosystem. It wasn't though until a hackathon in early 2020, Ethereum Denver in February of 2020, where that was like a really big inflection point for me. I met a bunch of people, and I was working on this hack that I still have as a side project today. But really, the acceleration inflection point for me was meeting a bunch of people who I ultimately was talking to, and they suggested that I join Raid Guild, which is actually the sweatshirt that I'm wearing today.
Nice.
And Raid Guild is a DAO, and kind of from joining Raid Guild, which I can describe in a second, but joining that and learning about all of that, I really fell in love with the concept of DAOs, and have come to develop a really profound, um, a deep appreciation for how powerful they can be to bring um, humanity to this like new plane of existence, and potentially overcome some of the like both existential risks and kind of petty other smaller challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis as humans trying to coordinate with each other. Um, DAOs are coordination mechanisms, and I think they have the promise to be the best coordination mechanisms we've ever had as people.
Wow.
So for that reason, I'm extremely excited about everything that's happening in the DAO space, and am trying my best to play a positive role in all of that.
Nice. So maybe give us a little history lesson of DAOs, from maybe the DAO or the precursors to the DAO to Raid Guild and why you joined it.
Yeah. So I obviously was not around. Well, I myself was not around for the DAO. So this history is going to be like 17th hand. So everybody listening to this should probably take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, and go find the primary sources to fill in the gaps, and probably correct some things I'm going to say incorrectly. But maybe a stylized history is that the DAO was started in 2016 with the promise of being a way for people within the Ethereum ecosystem to collect their resources, which was expressed exclusively at that point as Ether, collect their resources, and then go deploy that in a bunch of different directions to do good things. And those good things probably were gonna, with the idea of returning, providing a return for the people that put in their ETH in the first place. So this was a way to, in a decentralized fashion, with no individual controlling anything, or no even small set of people controlling the way the funds were flowing, to start to make investments as a big collective group. And that idea attracted a ton of interest and sucked up, and I'm probably going to get the detail wrong here, but like maybe 15 to 20, maybe even more % of all of the ETH in existence. And that was an amazing thing, and kind of a hint at some of the power of some of the mechanisms that we're talking about today and building on today in the DAO space. But it was also really risky, and that proved to be an issue, because there was a bug in one of the core contracts that led to all of the, or many of the funds within the DAO being drained by a hacker. That led to the split between Ethereum and ETH Classic over whether that change should be. I don't think technically it was reverted, but there was an irregular state change within the Ethereum chain, and the ETH Classic people didn't like that, and they forked off and kept the hack in place. Obviously, today Ethereum itself is much more valuable and has a much larger ecosystem. But the other impact of that is it created a DAO winter, where nobody really wanted to touch DAOs, because they understood very, very viscerally the risks that they were facing by joining a DAO. Slowly but surely, things started to pick back up again. DAO Stack and Aragon were two new DAO frameworks that were created. I think largely coming out of the ICO period within 2017, they were able to raise a lot of funds to build out more secure and like a bigger vision of DAOs. They were quite complicated, technically speaking, and that created some challenges with adoption. It was very difficult for individuals to understand what they needed to do to start a DAO or to join a DAO. There's a lot of technical components, a lot of code to be written, or command line stuff to happen, but that kind of all changed in early. What was it? It might have been even. I'm getting my years mixed up. It was either 2018 or 2019. Things move so fast here. The original Moloch DAO was created, and that kicked off a whole new wave of DAO activity. And the reason it did, because it was very simple. It was not this big sprawling modular piece of code or a piece of many code that you needed to plug in and make a lot of different challenging trade-offs with. It was just one smart contract, very simple concept. You put your money in, you get shares. Those shares enable you to vote on where that money goes, and you can also leave with your portion of the money by burning your shares at any point. And that simple concept kind of created this explosion of interest both in the original Moloch DAO, tons and tons of ETH, like thousands of ETH were put into the original Moloch DAO with the purpose of funding Ethereum 2 development. But it also inspired a ton of forks of that basic concept, and that kind of evolved into what's today we can call the Moloch DAO framework. And that has created that framework is used by hundreds, if not technically thousands of DAOs, which are basically, we can call them like magic internet communities. They all have like a shared bank account and governance over the resources that they control. That is one kind of direction that DAOs have gone. DAOs have also gone in a bunch of other different directions and there's a huge rich design space for DAOs that we're only starting to explore, but we've started to eke out into different parts of that design space. We have DAOs that are defined by a token, where an ERC-20 token represents your governance rights within that DAO, your voting weight within that DAO. We have other forms of DAOs that are oriented around task management or product management. We have DAOs that are optimizing for really, really cheap, or actually even sometimes gasless voting that have some weaker trust assumptions. But we have DAOs that have some stronger trust assumptions that are all on chain. And there's a whole bunch of different dimensions in this space, and that we're all kind of collectively exploring. But this past year has been there's been a ton of activity and a ton of new projects started and a ton of new energy created around DAOs and DAO tooling and the kind of the future of human coordination.
That's good. That's good. So is Raid Guild a Moloch DAO?
Yes.
And how is Raid Guild? How would a Moloch DAO be different than the ERC-20-based token DAO that you described earlier?
So the big differences are an ERC-20 token DAO. One of the attractive things about it is that it's permissionless. So anybody can go buy that token on an exchange somewhere, and then they're basically part of the DAO.
Got it.
There's a whole bunch of challenges that introduces. Now, one way to get around all those challenges is to make your DAO permissioned, and that's what a Moloch DAO, the Moloch DAO framework allows you to create a permissioned DAO, where to join the DAO you need to apply with an on-chain proposal requesting shares in the DAO. Members or people who have shares in the DAO are members of the DAO. So if there was an existing DAO, just like there was with Raid Guild when I joined, I submitted a proposal on chain to the Raid Guild DAO, requesting at the time it was 10 shares for a certain tribute, and that tribute was half an ETH, and that half an ETH went into the treasury, and then my shares actually reflected both, and then still do reflect my governance rights or the ability to collectively with everybody else control how those funds and everybody else's funds are spent on different things, but then also represents my economic rights, my exit rights over my sort of my pro rata share of the funds that are inside the DAO treasury. So at any point, I can decide that I don't like what's happening in the DAO, and I would prefer to have my money by myself and no longer be a member of the DAO. So I can exit, or what we call rage quit, from the DAO. And so it's permission shares. It's weighted weighted governance rights. So I can have 10 shares, or I could have 30 shares, or somebody else could have 100 shares. And then it's also minority protection and like minority opinion and voter protection via this exit right concept. Those are the three big tenets of a Moloch DAO, and all of those are pretty unique at this point to Moloch DAOs.
And why are they called Moloch DAOs? Like where'd that name come from?
So Moloch is, or one way to think about Moloch is as kind of the god, or almost like the demon that lives inside everybody, that prevents us from coordinating with each other. Mm-hmm. It comes from Scott Alexander's Meditation on Moloch essay from a number of years ago. And when the original Moloch DAO was created, it was named Moloch kind of reclaiming that concept, and in an attempt to slay Moloch, as the essay hopes that everybody will be able to do.
Nice. And so let's give an example. So Raid Guild in particular, what does it do? What is the purpose of specifically that Moloch DAO?
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different types of DAOs, kind of like I described earlier, but also in terms of what they try to do. Raid Guild specifically is what we could call a service DAO. And a service DAO is basically a DAO equivalent of any like consulting company or agency or organization, where what the organization is selling is the work and the effort and the expertise and the time of the people in the organization. So the way that works for Raid Guild is we are a Web3 development shop, basically, formed as a DAO or as a digital co-op, you could think. So clients come to us and they say, hey, I want help building this new decentralized application, or I want help writing these smart contracts, or I want help creating this Web3 enabled landing page for myself, or any of a number of different things, all in that Web3, all in the Web3 realm. So we have members who have lots and lots of different skills: smart contract development, front end, indexing, and sort of GraphQL kind of stuff. But we also have marketing services and project management and product management, and a whole host of different skills, kind of all collected under one house. And when a client comes to us, we figure out who are the best people, who are the right people to go work on that project. We call them raids. Who are the best people to go work on that raid? And then we collect them together, and there's opt-in, of course. And then they go off and in their raid party and attempt to slay the Web3 demons that our clients have.
And what happens if there are competing forces that says, I want this client, and there's not unity around how those are going to be dispersed amongst the talent in the guild? Like how is the leadership and the management structured?
So there's not much of I guess there is a management structure, but it is very flat. We are experimenting with lots of different methods for handling this, but we don't have any kind of top-down hierarchy or any kind of structure in that sense. So instead, what we have is very role-based. So we have what we call clerics, which are basically the equivalent of account managers, and they're basically the front door of Raid Guild. So a client will come in and they will submit a request for a consultation, and that consultation will be typically with one of our clerics, and the cleric can maybe pull in somebody else depending on the topic or the project that the client wants the guild to work on. And during that consultation, they'll talk through what it is that, like the scope, what it is that the guild would be doing. And then once the cleric has enough information, they'll basically go on like a little recruiting mission within the guild, and they'll try to find raiders who are available and have the relevant skills and interest in that particular project. And so it's really up to the cleric, but it's also up to the raiders what they want to do. So I could be approached to do something, and I could say, no, I don't have time for that, or no, that doesn't interest me, I'd rather do something different. So all members of the guild maintain full autonomy over what they're doing and who they're working for and what they're working on. that has presented, that's the way it should be. But also as we grow, that presents some challenges in coordination and figuring out who is actually available and who has certain skills. Because as we grow to the point where we don't necessarily all know each other intimately. So we've been working on a bunch of different mechanics using we introduced a new Raid Guild token called Raid that's helping us create some incentive mechanisms to help propagate some of that information throughout the guild and help coordinate that stuff while maintaining this individual member autonomy and a flat kind of structure.
Fascinating. Okay, so then the journey brought you there, and now let's talk about DAOHaus. Where did you start getting involved there? Talk about kind of what it is, how to get involved. I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, so Raid Guild is a Moloch DAO. To use and interact with the DAO, Raid Guild, along with a number of other DAOs, uses DAOHaus. DAOHaus is a web-based platform that basically provides a user interface to the Moloch DAO smart contracts. So it's DAOHaus started out as it was originally called Pokemon for Pocket Moloch. Very, very small, very, very focused, pretty minimalist kind of application where the idea was, here are the different functions that you can call in a Moloch DAO. Here are the different things that you can do based on those functions. We're just going to provide some buttons for people to click so they can create a proposal, vote on the proposal, see what's in the treasury, see how many shares they have, that sort of thing. About a year and let's say maybe a year and a half ago, 15 months, something like that, DAOHaus started turning into more of a cohesive, robust product. And I joined onto the project shortly after then through some people I had met within Raid Guild. And the goal at that point was to make it easier for as many other people and organizations as possible to do what Raid Guild did. And to do what a lot of the other DAOs that are using the DAOHaus platform to do, which is to give themselves a way to control shared resources and be a DAO without having to do a whole bunch of different coding and other technical activities. So DAOHaus, one way to talk about DAOHaus is as a no-code platform for creating and participating in DAOs.
That's awesome. All right, so then as a product manager, thinking about how to build a new product or service in Web3 paradigms, or helping to navigate a founder that has come to you as a Web3 PM to navigate the space and build something useful for humanity, how and when would you think about using DAOHaus? Would you think about incorporating a DAO into the product that's being built? Like, what would be a framework that you would help product managers think about that sort of thing?
So, like, at what point should you, if you have a project that you're working on or a company you're starting, at what point should that be a DAO instead of a company or with a single founder in charge? Or is it a different question?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the question, I think, is typical of the questions that are out there, because people don't necessarily understand how to either completely structure your venture as a DAO, or at what point do you introduce a DAO, and then technologically, what do PMs need to know about when to come to DAOHaus, right? It's kind of a multi-step question.
Yeah.
But piecing that apart might actually help somebody navigate this space.
So there are a lot of different philosophies on the kind of the opening question there, about at what point should your thing be a DAO, and how quickly to decentralize. There's this notion of progressive decentralization, which holds that you as a founder should maintain control as in the early stages, and kind of the project team that you build up around you should be able to move quickly and iterate fast in order to find product market fit for whatever it is you're doing. And then at that point, once you found product market fit, then this idea holds that that's the point at which you should start to decentralize and bring in other people to work with you and bring in the community more. That is an approach that I think can work for the right, and this is going to be my personal view now. That's an approach that I think can work for the right people, the right founders who really have a community-centric mindset, even from the outset, or are kind of uniquely capable of taking something that they've been in control of for a while and letting go. That, I think, though, is a pretty unique property of a human. It's pretty rare to be able to say, this thing is mine and I'm controlling it and I'm kind of driving the direction, and then saying, okay, it's no longer mine. There's a bunch of people that have done that. I think Robert Leshner with Compound is a great example, where Compound is now governed completely by its DAO, and Robert Leshner, the former CEO, remains an influential person, but he no longer has control. So many props to Robert for pulling that off. I suspect, though, that for the average founder, the average person, it's going to be too tempting to maintain control longer than it's actually helpful to do so. So what I hope to see, and when people talk to me about this, what I advocate for is to distribute power and control from the get-go. That doesn't necessarily
help tame Moloch a little bit right out of the gate.
Yeah, exactly. And that doesn't necessarily mean like everybody in the world can permissionlessly govern your thing when it's like a tiny little early startup. It doesn't mean that you have to distribute power to a bunch of different people, but it does mean that it should not just be you as a single founder making the decisions. You should start to build in the behaviors and patterns and muscle memory into your organization of how to make decisions in a collective and distributed way from the very beginning, even if you're just starting with 3 to 5 people. And I think one of the best ways to do that, even if you don't have a bunch of money to make decisions about how to allocate resources or about where to allocate, a great way to practice making distributed decisions and a great way to start giving away power to those around you from the get-go is with a Moloch DAO using DAOHaus. And so from the very beginning, it can be really valuable and help you in the long run to create a truly decentralized product, application, organization, whatever it is. If you start like on day 1 or day 5 or whatever, by creating a DAO on DAOHaus. And that can start to just help formalize a little bit or like concretize the idea of it's not just you making all the decisions. There's an explicit record of the power that you are distributing and giving away to other people from the very beginning.
So let's say a founder team has an idea for like an HRtech software platform and is going to be selling into existing companies, into the HR departments. Obviously, we're not lawyers, not legal advice, but would you, under what circumstances, or would you advise strongly new teams spinning up to think about actually organizing themselves right out of the gate as a DAO? Or what would be the circumstances that you might recommend somebody talk to their attorneys about, hey, is a DAO right for me?
So I think there's 2 answers to this. One answer is kind of ignoring the question a little bit and saying that it doesn't, like, even if you still are going to need like a more traditional legal entity, you can still use a DAO on DAOHaus as a tool to help you along the way. There's a distinction between like basically a single smart contract that is a DAO and the larger organization. Just because you have a DAO on DAOHaus doesn't mean your organization and every part of your organization has to be completely DAO native. There's a lot of flexibility and like composability of concepts here. So you can have many DAOs like composed within a bigger DAO, you could have many DAOs composed within, um, in theory, you could have many DAOs composed underneath a company, or a more traditional like legal organization. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about the long-term legal consequences of forming a DAO and using a DAO as a tool at the beginning.
Mm.
You have a lot of optionality of where to go. Um, really, what creating a DAO at the beginning and using a DAO as a tool at the beginning does is it gives you options. Um, you can kind of keep that core team kind of in control if that's the way things go, but it gives you the option to distribute power even further over time, by giving you a mechanism by which to do that. The second answer is that it really depends on what you're doing and like what you're selling or what you're building.
Hmm.
Things are much simpler if what you're doing is like within the Ethereum ecosystem, or like all on chain. Like within Raid Guild, we can get paid on like into our DAO directly or on chain because we're working with people who have crypto. If you are selling something though to people that don't necessarily have crypto, or you are building something that has like actual components in the real world, it get the interface between your DAO on Ethereum or on an Ethereum related blockchain, the interface between that and the real world is much more complicated. So the legal question becomes more important at that point.
Got it. All right. So the Web3 PM should be thinking about DAOs as composability, that there are aspects of an organization that maybe require community coordination, community ownership, and community governance that DAOs facilitate. Now, how extensible, if I spin up a DAO on DAOHaus, can I just take it and just hack away and create my own little nuances and smart contracts and things?
Yes.
What is that like?
Yeah. So there's a concept called a minion. So this is sort of a helper smart contract, or like a helper entity that helps a Moloch DAO, a DAO on DAOHaus, do a bunch of different things.
Got it.
So we have a bunch of kind of stock minions that you can use and select from. You could also write your own if you have the technical chops to do that. You could build your own that kind of creates more custom functionality for your DAO. So pretty much infinitely extensible in a certain way, and especially with some new kind of baseline DAO tooling from the Gnosis team. There's a lot of things that you can do to extend a Moloch DAO and use a Moloch DAO in lots of different composable ways.
And so DAOs spun up with DAOHaus are on xDAI. Can you explain what is that true? And then what is xDAI?
Yeah, so that's true. xDAI is a side chain to Ethereum that is filled with lots of Ethereum aligned projects and validating validators. So it's probably the most Ethereum aligned sidechain that exists. But it exists because it's extremely cheap, and gas is paid in DAI or xDAI rather than in ETH or some other token like Matic on the Polygon network. So there's lots of DAO organizations and DAO tooling and other kind of things that rely on cheap transactions. xDAI is not the only place though that you can have a DAOHaus DAO. You could, if you wanted to pay gobs and gobs of ETH for gas, you could have a DAOHaus DAO on Ethereum mainnet. We've supported that from day one. You could have a DAOHaus DAO on the Polygon network, or if you want to use an Optimistic-rollup and Ethereum L2, you could use Arbitrum. We support that as well. And soon enough, we'll probably have support for Optimism, another Optimistic-rollup, and a few other EVM sidechains as well. So pretty much anywhere that somebody wants to start a DAO, that's where we want to support.
And so a quick technical lesson for the PMs listening in, the difference between a rollup and a sidechain, and then the optimistic or not. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like a sidechain is sort of like almost like a meaningless term. Sidechain just means another L1, so like almost like a competitor to Ethereum, like a fully autonomous smart contract platform, basically. they're called sidechains when they have bridges to the Ethereum mainnet. So you can basically take your assets on Ethereum and bridge them over to the other chain. But the security of the other chain doesn't have any relationship with the security of Ethereum. An L2, layer 2, like an Optimistic-rollup or a zk-rollup, shares security properties with Ethereum because they continually post transaction data from the rollup chain to Ethereum mainnet, which allows Ethereum mainnet, if there's a dispute on what the rollup chain is doing, if somebody thinks there's one of the sequencers, one of the nodes is cheating or colluding with another to create invalid transactions, then on Ethereum itself, you can basically validate that, and there'll be a slashing condition that is triggered that punishes the parties at fault on the rollup. That's actually an optimistic rollup. So optimistic means we're just going to assume for a bit that everything's great, but we have this capability to create a dispute if we think something's not great. A zk rollup has basically very similar properties, but instead of assuming that everything is correct, we actually assert that everything is correct and prove that it's correct and valid with a zero knowledge proof, which then gets posted on Ethereum mainnet and can be verified, instantaneously.
Got it. Cool. All right. So what else? So we talked about the history of DAOs, your background in it, specifically how the raid guild nuances, how DAOHaus is built to accommodate when PM should think about it. What is the future of DAOHaus? Like, what do you or DAOHaus and DAOs in general? Like, what are you excited about with regard to the next season of what DAOs and DAOHaus in particular are heading into?
So we have seen this explosion of new DAO tools and thinking about the way DAOs work in the last 6 or so months, and that has meant a lot of new research and a lot of new mechanisms have started to come to the fore. But it also means a lot of new projects building cool things for DAOs to use have started in the last 6 or so months. And so what I'm really excited about is for DAOHaus to become, and we're starting to figure out the right way to do this and to work towards this, but I'm really excited for DAOHaus to become almost like the sort of human-centric operating system for DAOs. Not all DAOs, but the DAOs that make sense as community-centric kind of DAOs. And that means that DAOHaus sort of serves as creates the core user experience for the main functionality of the DAO, like membership and proposals and voting and that kind of stuff. But then creates these primitives or hooks or APIs or whatever they end up being that allow other developers to build on top of that foundation and connect their stuff, their tools that they create for DAOs into that foundation. So almost like iOS, for example, is this really beautiful, cohesive, user-friendly way to use your iPhone. But then you also have the App Store, which extends the hell out of it, right? You get all this other functionality and all these other things that you can use to customize the way you use your phone. So a DAO on DAOHaus could use all these other applications or plugins that we are calling boosts to increase what they're able to do or power what they are able to do, and select and from that set and customize what their DAO can do on DAOHaus.
Got it.
Unlike iOS, though, our App Store or our Boost marketplace is not going to take a 30% cut and be managed in a top-down way by Apple or by DAOHaus. Instead, that'll be community and already is to a degree community governed and curated. So it'll be much more open and permissionless, but curated in some way by the community, so that we know that the things that are kind of checked off or approved by the community are not going to be scams or are going to be high quality.
Right. Okay, awesome. All right, so then coming back to the fundamental question, last main question here.
Yeah.
for a Web3 PM advising themselves or the other founders, teams that they're working with, you as a PM, you should, how would you complete this sentence basically? You should start a DAO instead of a traditional company with command, sort of traditional management structures, if blank. Like when should somebody be thinking DAO versus traditional structure? Specifically Moloch DAO to get even more narrow here.
Okay, so the spicy answer is when you want to succeed, and when you want to actually compete with others, or to not be outcompeted by others who have chosen that direction. The less spicy, like I think that's eventually going to come when people realize the power of these new types of structures to attract talent, to collaborate with other organizations. It's always the case that the smartest people, the best people at what you're doing are not inside of your organization. So the best thing that you can do to have the best people is to make joining your organization as easy as possible. And that is a massive strength that DAOs have over existing kind of company structures. A Moloch DAO in particular, or a DAO on DAOHaus in particular, I think that regardless of where you end up going, like you could end up going, your DAO or your organization could end up being this big, massive, permissionless, token-defined DAO that anybody in the world can join. I think that's a great goal with some caveats. But even if your goal is to get there, I still recommend using a more permissioned, community-centric, humanistic kind of focused DAO to start with, because it's much easier to sort of have everybody relate to each other on a human level, and kind of see what emerges from that, and work together as a community, and then grow and start to mature, and then maybe harden into some more mechanistic type rules and logic over time.
I like it. All right, Spencer, where can people find you online to continue the conversation? Where can they find DAOHaus?
Yeah, so DAOHaus, the best place to go is to DAOHaus.club, DAOHaus.club. That'll be our kind of landing page, and you can get to the app from there and explore all the different DAOs that exist and see everything that's going on. Also find docs and other sort of explainers on that website too. To find me, probably Twitter is the best place. My handle is Spengrah, SPENGRAH. I would love to talk DAOs forever and ever, so please send me a message if you're interested in chatting.
Awesome. All right, Spencer, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Will. This is fun.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number two, my partners and I at Proto Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you and your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, it would be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.